Well, good morning, everyone. Good morning. If I could have your attention. I'm Pat Harker, President and CEO of the Federal Reserve Bank of Philadelphia, and I want to thank you. Welcome. Thank you for joining us here today. I want to thank Rick Sauer and his team at PACDC for having the Federal Reserve Bank of Philadelphia serve as host once again for your annual meeting. Rick, we really appreciate our strong relationship with the PACDC, and we're grateful for your role and your organization plays in Philadelphia to revitalize our neighborhoods. I also want to thank Teresa Singleton for her community development team from the Philly Fed, who alongside many other jobs here continues to pull together important events like today's symposium. Now, today's lineup of speakers and panelists is truly impressive. The conversations you will have today about economic development and equity, educating our young people and future workforce, and engaging new leadership are all important topics, important subjects in community development and critical for the overall health of our region, our economy. Since starting here at the Philly Fed in July, I've conducted a series of community development tours, visiting locations here in Philadelphia, in Allentown, Williamsport, and others. These visits and conversations have not only been informative to me, but also extremely empowering. I leave each one of those with a feeling of excitement about the incredible work being done by the nonprofit sector and the potential for partnership with the Philadelphia Fed. Seeing what organizations like you are doing to serve as problem solvers for this great city, it's inspiring. Without the engagement and commitment of community organizations like yours, the type of work we need to do together to keep Philadelphia a strong and sustainable economy simply would not be possible. So I want you to know, please know, that the Federal Reserve Bank of Philadelphia is your partner in these efforts. And I know Rick and his team have a great day planned for you. And I hope I haven't taken up too much of your time. And with that, let me turn it over to Rick and hope you enjoy the discussions that will follow. Again, welcome.
Thank you, Dr. Harker. As leaders in the community development field here in Philadelphia, we at PACDC are delighted to have you as a leader working to help strengthen our communities. And we're grateful that you and your excellent team are to help make this symposium a significant event to advance equitable development in the city and throughout our neighborhoods. We know that you're committed to a strong, equitable region, and we look forward to working with you to achieve that. Let me just quickly add my welcome and say how pleased we are to have all of you with us today at PACDC's third annual symposium on equitable development. It's part of our Community Development Leadership Institute, which is our initiative to both build the capacity of the local community development field, but also explore critical issues facing the industry. But first, since today's gathering also doubles as PACDC's annual membership meeting, I want to share with you the results from our recent online board elections. So the voting is in, and the board slate as proposed was approved by the membership. In particular, I want to congratulate all our board members on either their re-election or the election of two new board members, Brian Fencemaker from the Enterprise Center, CDC, and Wanda Mile from Achievability. Great to have you on board. And I also do want to acknowledge John McDonald, formerly of Impact Services, who is a longtime leader and board president on our board, who has just stepped down from the board. Fortunately, we're going to have his continued involvement on our advisory board, but he's been instrumental in advancing PACDC over the last decade. In addition, the board of directors has reaffirmed our current slate of officers, re-upped them for another year. So we are glad to have a strong leadership team in place overall at the organization. The other half of the board will be up for election next year, and we look forward to their continued involvement, and who knows, maybe we'll have another vacancy or two to bring on some other new young blood. So as you came into the auditorium, there were a bunch of slides up on the screen sort of highlighting some of the key accomplishments on both the policy and member services front of PACDC over the last year. And it was a very successful year, but we don't do that alone at the organization. It's been really instrumental, all the involvement of all of our members, our partners, our funders to achieve this work. So we just want to give a big thank you to all of you for supporting our efforts and enabling us to move that forward during the year. And I would be remiss if I also didn't do a big shout out to the PACDC staff, which is doing the day-to-day work of really moving all these efforts forward. So please join me in thanking the staff. Just have a couple quick announcements. There's a lot going on in the near future. I just want to make sure you're aware of opportunities to be engaged. First of all, this afternoon in the mayor's reception room at 3 o'clock, there's going to be a significant announcement around transfer of properties into the Philadelphia Land Bank, which is a major step forward towards implementation of the effective land bank. As some people may know, there was both resolutions introduced in several city council districts to move properties in from agencies, and also we're hoping that the city will make an announcement around some other property movement today. So if you are inclined to join us for that event at 3 o'clock, Mayor's Reception Room, it would be great to have you there. In addition, on this coming Tuesday in the same location, there's going to be a celebration for the 10-year anniversary of the Philadelphia Housing Trust Fund. Yes, hard to believe the trust fund's been around 10 years now after that long campaign to get it in place. But it's raised over $113 million to date and has helped over 27,000 households since its inception. So please come join us to celebrate that success over the last decade on this coming Tuesday. In addition, PACDC has been working with the Philadelphia Social Innovation Journal, which you may or may not be familiar with, to put together a community development edition. It's an online journal that goes out to, I think, about 50,000 stakeholders around the region, but there's also going to be a forum at the end of January to highlight some of the results of innovations in the local community development industry. So you'll be getting more information about that. Stay tuned. And we will be shortly sending out our blast of new trainings coming up for the winter-spring session. Up on the screen is just the highlights of a few of them that'll be happening. So in addition to the regular Community Development Leadership Institutes that Pam oversees, we are also pleased to announce that there's a new partnership that's been formed between the CEDA, which is the National Alliance of Community Economic Development Associations, and BB&T, to bring the Neighborhood Development Council's National Certificate Program in Affordable Housing Development to our region. And so we're partnering with the Housing Alliance, with the Housing Community Development Network of New Jersey, with groups in Maryland to bring this extensive training series, 17 training days overall over about a year and a half, where you can earn a certificate in the program at a deep discount. So we'll be sending out information if you're interested in registering for that in the near future as well. So a lot going on, and stay tuned for more. But now it's my pleasure to invite PACDC's newly re-elected board president to the podium to introduce our keynote speaker. So please join me in welcoming Rose Gray, Senior Vice President of Community Economic Development, Association Puerto Ricanos en Marcha.
Good morning, and I'm so excited to see how many people are attending, and I want to thank all of you for your commitment to our industry. Like many of you, I'm a news junkie. I get up in the morning, turn on the news. At night, I turn on the news. During the day, I'm on my computer on the news. And on Friday nights, my special night, I get a glass of wine, a piece of pizza, and I turn on PCN to see what happened in the state and around the country. Well, a couple weeks ago, I turned it on, and the Committee of 70 was having their luncheon, and our newly elected mayor was the speaker. And he was commiserating about his time in council with Mayor Nutter, the importance of the Committee of 70, as well as the importance of transparency. So all excited, right? And then he started to talk about his campaign and meeting his constituents and the citizens of Philadelphia. And he was saying, they would say, well, we have this issue, and how are you going to solve this, and how are you going to solve that, and we'd like this policy. And he said something really important. He said, how are we going to solve it? How are we going to create the policies? How are we going to move Philadelphia forward? And I was reflecting on the campaign and his papers and, involving us as well as others, and the transition team and the members he put on it. And I realized he's really talking about we. So knowing that there's a future for all of us collectively, we invite you, Mayor-elect Jim Kenney, to speak.
Thank you, Rose. Thank you very much, and thank you for being here and for the invitation to be here. When I came into the building, which is actually the first time I've ever been in this building, it's just kind of strange, and gone through the security. But before I got in the building, there was one of the flagpoles outside said "Money on the Move," and I think that's what we should be about: money on the move, not only at the high level, but at the medium level and the low level, because unless all of us rise together, none of us will. And when I have had I guess the privilege and the strange position of actually picketing my own airport, which was recently, because the people who are working down there with some of the subcontractors are being treated terribly. They're being paid slave wages. They're being threatened when they want to organize as a union. And so I talked to a woman who worked for one of those companies for about 9 years, and she's making $8.50 an hour. Something's wrong with that. Something's wrong with that, because in this town and anywhere, if you work 60, 70, 80 hours a week and you're still poor, there's something wrong with the formula. And when all the wealth is concentrated in one set of folks and the rest of the folks who really do struggle every day to do the right thing don't take advantage of it or can't take advantage of it, something's wrong with the way we look at life. And that's why it's very important that we continue to work with these organizations that are represented here and the city, and using the wealth of the city and the equity of the city to make sure everyone's lives are improved. So I thank all the members of the Philadelphia Association of CDCs for inviting me to speak and for the work you do. And I also like to acknowledge the presence of Councilman Wilson Good, who's here, and I believe is Maria Quinones Sanchez here? Well, she's not here, but I like to thank them both, because over the course of my career, I learned a lot from both of them about community development in my time in council, and I want to give him the opportunity to take a bow for what he's done for work with me. But the most important lesson I learned in that course is that the rising tide often doesn't lift all boats. City government is responsible for ensuring that as Philadelphia's economy grows, the financial well-being of every Philadelphian should grow with it. But the city can't do it alone. In order to truly decrease economic inequality, we need every one of our private and public partners working towards the same goal. That requires partnerships between CDCs, banks, architects, and others who support community-based development. This symposium is an important part of incentivizing these partnerships, and I commend the Philadelphia Association of CDCs for organizing it each and every year. So please join me in giving them a round of applause. It's a simple fact that our city's future vitality is dependent on the equitable development of neighborhoods all across the city. Center City is important to Philadelphia's health, and it always will be, but we cannot ignore the commercial corridors that extend beyond that if we want to have a strong, growing small business community, a meaningful increase in employment for Philadelphians of color, reduce crime, or a strong, diversified economy for the long term. The next administration's economic policy will be focused on strengthening neighborhood commercial corridors by establishing partnerships between the land bank, the city, and CDCs. Under this model, CDCs will receive financial support from PACDC and other partner institutions. The CDCs will then use those resources to gain ownership of strategic properties along a commercial corridor and help subsidize startup businesses through lower rents or sales. Additionally, by directing the land bank to take ownership of vacant commercial and mixed-use properties along corridors, the city can ensure that these properties are not held by speculators who often allow the properties to fall into disrepair. To penalize existing negligent property owners, I will expand CLIP, the Community Life Improvement Program, to assist commercial corridor development groups in enforcing code violations and punishing property speculators. However, we recognize that helping to stimulate local business development is only part of the equation. Currently, many commercial corridors in Philadelphia have high levels of vacancy in their second and third floor units. Filling these vacancies makes the neighborhood safer and creates a natural customer base for the businesses on the floors below. To make these housing options more attractive, we will continue to support the Housing Trust Fund and invest city general fund dollars to repair and preserve these properties. In conclusion, I have spent a lot of time today talking about what the city will do, but the fact remains that we can't really tackle the essential problems we are discussing here today without everyone's help. Almost every day I'm asked, what am I going to do on a particular problem? But as Rose said again, what are we going to do? Because everyone looks to government for the final answers to everything, when in fact the answers lie in the brains and the work of the people sitting in this room. The mayor and the government needs to be facilitators, needs to be, as I use often, my staff is annoyed at my sports reference, but a good mayor is a good point guard. Understands the offense, calls the plays, makes all the players on the team look good, and the team wins. Now, if you're a singles tennis player, you may be a wonderful singles tennis player, you may wind up at Wimbledon, but you're not doing anything for the team. And I think the team is what's really important. So I thank you again to the Philadelphia Association for Community Development Corporations for bringing us all together to foster partnerships and share ideas. And I'll be happy to join the other panelists and take your questions as the morning goes on. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Mayor-elect Kenney. We're excited to hear your plans for advancing equitable development and revitalization of Philadelphia's neighborhoods, and how your administration is going to work to advance housing and community development here in Philadelphia. I now have the pleasure of moderating a conversation between the mayor-elect and a few of our member representatives from the local housing and community development industry. So if the following folks can please join us up here on the stage. Ilyas Mohammed from Universal Companies, Angel Rodriguez from Association Puerto Ricanos La Marcha, Sister Mary Scullion from Project Home, is she here yet? And Joanna Winchester from New Kensington CDC. Great. So hopefully Sister Mary will be joining us shortly. But thank you all for agreeing to participate today, and the mayor for giving us additional time to participate in this conversation. So to get started, I just have a few questions I'm going to throw out to both CDCs and Jim, to you as well. And I guess, Joanne, we can start with you, since Mayor-elect was just articulating sort of a vision for revitalization of commercial corridors and the support of small businesses in those communities. As Economic Development Director at New Kensington CDC, you play a direct role in working with small businesses and working to strengthen that corridor, whether it's on Frankfurt Avenue or Girard or Lehigh Avenue in your neighborhood. And I'm sure you've learned much over the years around what makes a healthy, strong, vibrant corridor. So can you fill in a little bit what the mayor could champion beyond what he articulated to help achieve that here in the city?
Sure, and thanks, Rick, and thank you so much, Mayor Kenney, for being here. And I was really excited to hear about some of the programs that you're proposing. Those sound like they would be great additions to strengthening our corridors. And just to give you all kind of a background on NKCDC and what we do in commercial corridors, we've been working in the Kensington, Port Richmond, and Fishtown neighborhoods since 1985. Our corridor work really started in the 90s with vacant land stabilization, so I was really excited to hear about the land bank idea and working with that to get the corridors stronger. But really in the 90s, we started focusing on the corridors with our Frankfurt Avenue of the Arts plan. And Frankfurt Avenue has come a long way, and we found that really what works in all of these things is building those relationships with the businesses, building community, and that really has to happen through one-on-one work on the ground. So having folks like Sam and Kay, who work for NKCDC as corridor managers, as well as our cleaning crew, Clayton and Marius, who are out there every day cleaning the corridors. It gives us a visible presence. It helps businesses feel comfortable and start to grow. And we've really seen the results of that in our neighborhood. In this past year, we had 53 new businesses open in our neighborhood. 40 of them were on commercial corridors. So our corridors really are kind of driving that small growth, or small business growth, excuse me. And along with that, we also had $472,000 of public investment come to our neighborhood, specifically targeted towards small businesses. So that's through grants, through matching grants, through loans. And really what we're seeing is that that public investment, the resources to back up our relationships, really helps us to grow the business community. So we'd love to see things like the tax credit partnership and the targeted corridor management program and cleaning programs be strengthened and continued so that we can continue to build those relationships and really deepen that impact.
So I think, yeah, one of the key things that Joanne, that you just pointed out is that in addition to direct assistance to the small businesses themselves, whether through the storefront improvement program or in-store things like that, the long-term financial support for CDCs so they can play sort of that facilitator intermediary role on the corridors are really key to organizing the businesses and to advancing the larger change to revitalize those corridors. So Jim, I don't know if you have anything you want to add? Or?
One of the things I think is important, and I'm glad Universal's here because they, for me, give an example of exactly what CDCs should be doing, and that is when a neighborhood begins to change, when it begins to gentrify, it begins to improve in property values. They controlled enough of the property there to ensure affordable housing remains in the neighborhood. So when you look at certain neighborhoods that are going through gentrification now, the stress that's there between the long-term residents and the newcomers, of which we want the newcomers there, is palpable sometimes in neighborhoods. When you go over west of Broad Street and the Christian Street, Catherine Street area, you go into the Christian Street Y, for example, and you'll see old timers and young professionals side by side, working out, meeting together, and it's really not that kind of pressure. Go over to Gray's Ferry, and you'll see where there wasn't a strong CDC controlling property in the neighborhood for affordability and creating neighborhood-driven businesses. You see that, you hear and feel and see that kind of tension. So wherever you see a neighborhood beginning to kind of come back, and I'll give you the East Passaic Avenue example. I mean, East Passaic Avenue 15 years ago wasn't exactly a depressed area, but it was an area where generational business owners kind of had their bills paid, their mortgages were paid. There wasn't that fire in the belly for, you know, they'd open at 11, they'd close at 4, they wouldn't take credit cards, they wouldn't take returns. I mean, it's like, and then they would park their cars in front of the meters and feed the meter all day and complain that nobody came into their shop because there was no place to park. So we had to really do a great educational effort by, again, controlling. We started out with 20 properties, and I mean, and I know the FUMO Citizens Alliance saga is legendary, but one of the major things that they did that was accomplished from that money from PICO was the collection of 20 or so properties that really were the core of that street. And then when you begin to lease those properties out to people and businesses that are part of the program you're trying to promote, you can then, as a mall operator, get them to cooperate with advertising, with street festivals, with all, making sure that they do the things that the mall owners are doing so people stay at Passaic Avenue and don't go to Deptford. And I think we've really accomplished that. But when I look at neighborhood business strips throughout the city, Germantown and Chelton, for example, I mean, has a core of long-term businesses with some vacancy around it. If we can concentrate these efforts in areas like that and other places around the city, you begin to grow that, you make it stable again, and begin to grow the businesses, which gives people the opportunity to start their own businesses, which is awesome. And it also gives the opportunity for affordable housing opportunities above those stores, restaurants, and shops, so that the neighborhood stays middle class while at the same time improving in housing values. I mean, you can do both. You don't have to do one or the other. What I see now, for example, and I never thought I'd see Kensington Avenue beginning, I mean, I'm a lifelong Philadelphian, and I know various neighborhoods. I mean, and 15, 20 years ago, Frankfurt Avenue was, getting a little rough, getting a little whatever, and now it looks like that I'm not that I'm a New York lover, but it reminds me of Brooklyn, what's happening in Brooklyn. And I think Kensington Avenue, for example, I just rode down there a week ago or so, and there's still that rough patches of people who are struggling with addiction, struggling with other issues, but, there's the Wi-Fi coffee shop, and there's this, the immigrant restaurant, and you start to see buds of it. Same thing happened down in South Philadelphia when I was growing up in the 60s. The neighborhood I lived in South Philly is about one-third Jewish and two-thirds Irish Catholic, which is an interesting combination of characters. All blue-collar Jews and blue-collar Irish Catholics. And 7th Street, from Porter Street to McKean, was the shopping mecca of the neighborhood. And my mom bought everything off that, from your food to underwear to anything, clothing, Botany 500, Eagle shoes. And when the older Jewish merchants began to die off and their children didn't want to run the shops and live there, they were becoming professionals and moving on, the neighborhood began to decline. And then when the influx of Cambodian, Southeast Asian, Vietnamese, Laotian folks started to come in because of our politics in Southeast Asia, they started to build it back up again. And you start seeing the roots of another renaissance there, which I think we need to foster and support. And that, not only in South Philly, but in every neighborhood in the city. And I think if we can do that, we can make all boats rise. We can help provide employment, entrepreneurship, and affordable housing in our communities, which I think are wonderful. And the other issue, and I'll stop because I can babble on forever. The other issue is pre-K. One of the pre-K strategies is to have them located in business strips so that local people can get certified in early childhood education, create employment opportunities, and expand the reach of pre-K for our 3 and 4-year-old babies who really need that structure before they get into kindergarten and to first grade.
Thanks, Jim. What's that? Sure. Go ahead.
So Mayor Kenny, I love that you were talking also about keeping things accessible and equitable. One thing that we've noticed with a lot of the programs that we work through the city to offer to small businesses is that some of them are really easy to implement on places like Frankfurt Avenue that have been going through development. But there are corridors like Kensington where, a matching grant is really difficult for someone who can't come up with that match. So we'd love to see ways to have those programs extended for those kinds of businesses.
PACDC has expressed a real desire to be kind of the kind of conduit or facilitator of those kinds of investments. And Harold Epps is our new Commerce Director, he's done me a wonderful favor by agreeing to serve. His stature, his reputation, his diversity really makes a difference, and people are very excited about that. He said he was not going to accept the position unless we allowed him to go and actually do work in community and business corridors. That, for him, is the most important part of his job, which really, considering the high level which he had served in corporate America, to have him focus solely on that, or not solely, but important, making that an important part of his goals, really made me feel good that we were making the right choice.
Great, thank you. So Ilias, as the Neighborhood Advisory Committee, or what we call NAC coordinator for Universal Communities, one of your jobs is really to go out in the community and knock on the doors of homeowners and that may be at risk of losing their home to foreclosure, and to help them enroll in the mortgage foreclosure diversion program, and also make sure they're aware of the property tax relief measures that have been put in place so they can afford to stay in their home. And we know that these programs get a lot of publicity through the media or through mailers in your water bill or whatever, so the city is trying to get the word out. But
they're not trying to get the word out that much, trust me. It's a big fight we have with the administration.
But beyond sort of that mass marketing type thing, can you speak to the importance of actually engaging the community on a one-on-one basis, but going out and doing that door knocking, and what does that achieve?
Good morning, everyone. Yes, so I am the Neighborhood Advisory Committee Coordinator with Universal Community Homes. And as everyone may already know, Universal Community Homes was established as a 501c3 back in '93 with a focus on community development, education management, and since has evolved to become a leader in areas such as looking at housing, economics, education, family and support services, health and technology, a long list of things that Universal focuses on. As it relates to the mortgage foreclosure diversion program, why is it so important for the NAC to go out, the NAC organizers to go out, and the NAC coordinators to go out and speak directly to community members about what they're presently dealing with? So when I first started working with Universal, I would receive lists of names, addresses of about 50 people per month. And with those 50 people, we were obligated to go out to these homes 3 times a month. So think about it, that's 150 times, okay, if we didn't breach them the first time. And the reason why it was so critical was because even if they received a mailer, they may not saw it. And sometimes when I reached the home, they were surprised by this. They didn't have any clue whatsoever. And us at Universal Community Homes, NAC, Universal Companies, felt it was so important. I personally felt it was so important that, in fact, on days that I had off from work, such as holidays, weekends, and things of that nature, I would go out to homeowners' homes because we see that it's important, as Mayor-elect Kenny stated, that longtime historic residents remain in our communities. Right now, we see that there is a major issue and problem in Point Breeze and Grace Ferry, and I'm gonna share with you right now what that is. Point Breeze and Grace Ferry community is in danger of being, gentrification is happening now, but to the point where clearly they're gonna push out and displace families that have been there for generation and generation. Universal Community Homes, NAC, and Universal Companies, for Point Breeze and Grace Ferry, we have a vision. We have a vision of great schools and strong neighborhoods, okay? And it's important that, as Mayor-elect Kenny said, that historic residents and new residents can live happily side by side, okay, without historic residents being displaced and pushed out due to gentrification. And that's the main conversation that happens at majority of my meetings, whether it's dealing with the block captains, going to the Police District Advisory Council meetings, or any meeting whatsoever. The root cause of it seems that every problem is rooted to this idea of gentrification that's happening within the community. And so Universal Companies, mainly our aim is to provide community with the resources. With the NAC, we connect resources that relates to housing, education, employment, and so on and so forth. But really to ensure that our community members have a greater quality of life. And we're not against, I wanna say this, we're not against new residents, we're not. But what we are against is displacing long-term historic residents that have lived in Point Breeze and Grace Ferry for generation after generation after generation. So with the NAC, we do our foreclosure outreach at times with limited resources, okay? So the NAC, and I speak for all NACs, we do operate a lot of times under limited resources. So when we're going out, going door to door, reaching out to, as I said, 50+ families a month, of several times a month, it's something more that's driving us, okay? It's something more that's driving us. We see that if we address this root cause of the problems that majority of our community members deal with, we can really come up with some solutions. And also, we with the foreclosure outreach that we do, when we have our service area briefings or we have our other community meetings as it relates to health and wellness, with enrolling folks with Affordable Care Act, health care, or having block captain conferences and so forth, we make sure we speak to how community members can receive adequate housing counseling from individuals right in their neighborhood. Right now we have, as many people know, we have the Dixon House that is located in South Philly, United Communities, a number of others that assist folks keep their homes, because we want to ensure not only that we do have this new influx of residents come, but we want to make sure that there's not this extreme displacement of current residents. So.
Great, thanks, Elias. So, Jim, you spoke earlier about the importance of making sure that long-term residents can remain in communities, but could you speak a little bit to the issue more around sort of the important role that community engagement plays, and NACs in particular, which are sort of a program of CDC's and funded by the city's Office of Housing and Community Development, the important role they play in sort of encouraging community engagement, civic engagement as part of a strategy to advance strong, healthy, and vibrant neighborhoods?
Well, first of all, I think the LOOP program and the Homestead program are critical to ensuring that in assessment inflation doesn't really detrimentally affect our long-term residents. And when I first saw gentrification happen, it was Queen Village, and that's how long ago it was. It was probably late 70s or mid 70s, late 70s, early 80s. Basically a neighborhood, it wasn't Queen Village, it was Second and South, the Queen Village. And I tell you, the other thing too is when people assume to rename a neighborhood without really asking the people who live there, it becomes problematic, and it's very symbolic of the attitude sometimes that people either do intentionally or unintentionally when it comes to changing Grace Ferry to Newbold or, I mean, it's just like, it's the kind of buzzwords that, I mean, and I'm not saying that you don't want to maybe necessarily, you don't want to rebrand your neighbor. It's not that you don't want to rebrand your neighbor. You don't want to rebrand it to the point where you ignore the history of the people who have lived there. And the thing that I learned when I watched gentrification in Queen Village, or Second and South, was that African Americans, Polish people, Russians, people who had lived there for generations, you know, were being really forced out of the communities because they couldn't afford the increase in property taxes. There wasn't the Loop program. I mean, when I worked for FUMO back in the 80s, we actually did the constitutional amendment of the state constitution allowing for the relief for long-term residents in gentrifying areas. It took 20 years or more to actually implement it, because what would happen in council before I got there, when you talked about implementing a gentrification program and protection for long-term residents, every district council person in the council wanted their neighborhoods involved in it, but not every neighborhood in Philadelphia is gentrifying. So we could not no one wanted to discriminate against their own neighborhoods, so we could never get the votes together to get it passed. Finally, with AVI, which was the impetus for the Loop, and again, the long-term owner-occupant protection, there was some stress between the administration and district council members on informing people fully about the opportunities to sign up for Loop. I remember Mark Squilla wanted to print the actual applications to put them in the real estate bills, and the administration told them no, they wouldn't mail there was a mailer for each district council person on AVI explaining the program. He wanted to put the Loop applications in the envelopes, and they wouldn't print them. So there was this resistance on the part of the revenue collection people not to inform people as much as possible on the existence of Loop. Mark eventually took his campaign money and paid for the mailing himself, and went out to the people in his district, and his neighbors in his district. I think it's really using CDCs, using NACs, using other organizations to inform people as what they have available to them. If you don't sign up for Loop, you don't sign up for the homestead, I mean, you really, as a long-term, potentially elderly resident in a neighborhood that's changing, you're really in jeopardy. And I think that we need to do a better job in informing people what's accessible to them in the way to keep their home. Because in the end, if the neighborhood changes that drastically and you push all the old heads out, all the old timers out, it's not the same neighborhood. It's not what attracted you to the neighborhood in the first place. I mean, you move in, you know, some of these youngsters that are moving into South Philadelphia, the hipsters and grungers and the bike people, and, you know, it's like, it's awesome. I'm glad they're coming. But if that old Italian guy or woman on the street isn't there anymore to watch your car or to watch your house, or to, you know, it changes the whole flavor of the neighborhood. And I think that's what I admire much about Universal, is that neighborhood in, you know, 19th and Christian has new influx of people, but it hasn't lost the flavor of the old timers, which really bring a level of, I guess, culture and fun to interacting with people with different diversities. So,
Yeah, go ahead, Elias.
I just wanted to add, you know, with Universal NAC and Universal, we just want to create an environment where students can go to great schools in our neighborhoods, go off to college, and come back to raise their families and live in the neighborhoods that they grew up in, right? So that's what we want to have happen for them, and we see that's how you grow a neighborhood, grow a community in a better way. So just wanted to add to that.
Great. And we do have a breakout session after this around neighborhood identity, which goes to the core of the issue that you were just talking about. And you also mentioned that, you know, while some neighborhoods are gentrifying, clearly others are still facing disinvestment. And so clearly there's not just one strategy that's going to work citywide. We need different approaches that are geared towards the markets and conditions in different neighborhoods.
but I will tell you, if you can build the neighborhood business districts, it will come. because as I used to live on 11th Street around the corner from Passyunk. My house was worth whatever it was, but it's probably worth 3 times what it was worth then, because the neighborhood business district grew. And it really does, it ripples out to the neighborhood. So and I'm from South Philly my whole life, so I worked at an architecture and engineering firm, and one of the young female architect, said to me, "I just bought a house in your neighborhood." She was all excited. And I said, "Where?" She said, "8th and Jackson." And I went, "Are you sure?" And she said, "Yeah, it's great there. Housing value is wonderful. The people are nice. Well, there's a little drug problem house on the street, but we're working on it." And it's really nice to see that kind of pioneering spirit, that kind of rebirth, renewal, where a young person, because of the value of the housing stock and what they're getting a 3-bedroom, bath and a half, nice yard house, where they couldn't afford that in New York or Boston or Washington, D.C. And I think that's part of the selling point for college graduates in our region, is that this is an affordable, vital, metropolitan place, but you can afford to live here with decent mass transit and good culture and fun. Sports teams aside these days, we can always cheer for Temple, which is awesome. But I'm saying that it's not just one thing. It's multiple layers of things that really make neighborhoods survive and grow.
Great. So Angel, you work with APM in a neighborhood just east of Temple University where there was long-term disinvestment, a lot of vacant properties, and to be honest, the private market had sort of left. There wasn't much of a housing market there, and APM, over a prolonged period of time of investment, has really worked to both address the needs of residents living there, but also recreate a market, both through rental housing, home ownership, the supermarket, the whole ball of wax that you've done there. And there's other communities around the city that are like that, where CDCs have invested in the long term and have started turning things around. And you see private developers starting to come back in to those, having interest in those neighborhoods again. And so how do you think the city can, in those situations, how can the city continue to make sure that we're investing in low-income people that the private market doesn't always serve in those neighborhoods?
Well, good morning, and thank you for the opportunity to be here. APM, for those of you that don't know, has a 45-year history working in Eastern North Philadelphia. We do an array of services, much like all of the CDCs here, from healthcare, drug and alcohol counseling, to physical development, financial literacy, and we happen to have one of the most disinvested corridors in Eastern North. But one thing that we've been able to do is targeted development, starting to create the market with affordable rentals, then getting rid of a food desert, and then home ownership, and then actually market rate rentals. We would not be able to do that without the Housing Trust Fund and other set-asides that have been placed by the city and also with the state, with PHFA, and other programs through the NAC and through other, corridor process services they do for small businesses. But I think one thing that would be really important for us as we are creating the market is that we have people holding land. Part of the reason, as you keep bringing up about corridors and revitalizing corridors, if you go from Burke Street moving north past Susquehanna, there are large tracts of land on the corridor that are underdeveloped. So I guess if I might ask a question to give you an opportunity to talk more about your plans for the Housing Trust Fund, also how to help CDCs to actually create more of a market and commercial market without displacing, the people in the neighborhood. I think one other thing is to recognize is that it's great to bring people in, but we also have to increase the household income so that we can support those corridors as well.
Well, first of all, I think the increase in the fees for recording deeds will be done, and we'll put that money into the Housing Trust Fund to bolster the work that they do. I think also, I'm sorry, my phones. I hate these phones. I have no idea. I have 2. I was supposed to be weaned off the one, and I can't wean off either, so I'm stuck. So the deed recording fees will be increased appropriately so that we can put that money into the Housing Trust Fund. I also think that as we talked about multifaceted issues, I mean, wages in Philadelphia. All right, I talked earlier during my presentation about the airport workers and the like. I mean, we need to have, and Wilson Goode, one of his great legacies is the $12 living wage, which I think we need to figure out a way to have that increased on a regular basis without having to go through a vote every time. So looking at some kind of cost of living adjustment to the minimum wage or to the living wage, I think is important. And I also think is that being guided by the CDCs on what it is they need, as opposed, I mean, all these top-down solutions really never work. It's really the bottom-up solutions that make the difference. And I think the collaboration with CDCs in directing us as to where we put our resources. And I also think that PIDC has not been as big a player as PIDC could be, and they've offered. I didn't go to them. John Grady came to me and said, I have some ideas on how we can do community reinvestment or community investment through PIDC and PAID, which is affordable and makes a lot of sense, and we can direct those resources directly into communities. So I think that, and again, as I said earlier, Howard Epps is a mantra about community business development. Neighborhood corridors is something that we're all going to get behind. But again, we need, I say this a lot of times, I'm a smart person, but I'm not the smartest person in the room ever. And if you think you are, you're not that smart. So you need really people around you that are smarter than you, that have more experience, and that can direct you in certain areas. And I think that relying on this community, on this industry, will really push us in the right direction. And I look forward to working with you in that regard.
As a follow-up, I just want, one of the other issues that we've been able to do in creating the market in Eastern North is that basic systems repair. As we do new developments throughout the neighborhood and improve the quality of life, really working with our partners and rebuild, together, and targeting blocks and actually going in there. And you could see the demonstrable change, obviously on the balance sheet of the families that own those properties, but just in the quality and how you create cohesion.
Well, it's also an opportunity for employment. I mean, and part of our economic approach to raising all boats, making all boats rise, is the issue of reentry. We have a terrible situation when it comes with people coming back from incarceration, not being prepared for them, not having them prepared. And I think one of the ways in which the building trades can be helpful in changing the narrative, because they've not been as open as we would like them to have been. This is an opportunity for them to provide training opportunities for people who are unemployed, underemployed, or coming back from incarceration. I mean, these folks coming back to us have talent. And if you saw, one of the most compelling and transformative periods of the Pope's visit was his visit to Kern-Fromhold. I mean, you forget the fact that people have souls and spirits, and they're still alive there. They may be locked up, they may have done something wrong in their lives, and they may be paying that price, but there's still a humanity there that needs to be rekindled again. And you rekindle that through training and through opportunities to work and to get your life straight. And I think that basic systems repair program and things like that, I think opportunities for employment within the city government. I mean, right now, our contractors for city contracts are not allowed to hire ex-offenders by contract. It's the stupidest thing I ever heard. I didn't realize it until I was in a meeting with the company that maintains our prison complex. And I said to them, what do you do about diversity and reentry? And they said, well, reentry, we can't. We're not allowed. I said, you're not allowed to hire a guy in the prison to help you with the HVAC program? HVAC work? No. I said, well, all that's got to change. Because if we're going to ask the Chamber of Commerce to provide, to abide by ban the box and abide by the opportunities to give people a second chance, and we don't do it as a city, we ought to be ashamed of ourselves. There's no reason why. It's a little off subject, but again, it's all related, because there's no reason why someone who's coming out of one of our correctional facilities could not work in the sanitation department, could not work in automotive, could not work in Parks and Rec. I mean, there's opportunities for us to allow people to reclaim their lives. And if we don't use our city resources and our government resources to do it, we can't expect the private sector to do it. So we just really, and one of my aspirational goals, again, we're going off CDCs, I mean, people are saying to me, are you going to buy that land up on State Road? No, I don't want to build a prison. You build a prison, you fill it up. I want to try, our aspirational goal is to empty out one of our prisons. I mean, think about it. We have 6,000 to 7,000 people locked up in our county prison system every day. 70% or more of them simply are there because they can't make bail. I'd rather pay the bail. I mean, of $115 a day, $35,000 a year to keep somebody locked up, that's a tuition payment. Why am I allowing that to happen? So bail reform, prison reform, correctional reform, education, training, drug treatment, I mean, it's all related to neighborhood stability. And if we can have people come back to us to become fountains instead of drains, I think we'll all be better off for it. So, I mean, I think it's all related.
Glad to hear your strong support for creating new avenues for returning citizens, as well as your support for expanding funding for the Housing Trust Fund. It's been really a critical source of funding, both to CDCs to develop new affordable homes, but also to do that home repair and BSRP type work.
I mean, and folks who are coming back to us, or people who are unemployed, or guys that are standing on a corner with no future and no direction, with a pistol in their waistband, waiting for the cemetery or jail, could be working in improving people's homes and improving neighborhoods. The other issue for me, frankly, is our immigration situation, which of course is an atrocious national debate, which is beyond, I mean, yesterday got beyond any pale of sensibility. I mean, I just was flabbergasted at that. But the point is that we have people who are in the shadows, who are business owners, who are residents, who need to come up and be part of our community. And if we continue to shun them and push them down and not allow them to be, whether they're documented or not, it really doesn't matter. They're here and they're human beings, and we have a responsibility to live together and to do well for each other. And people live in fear. I want to stop people living in fear, because in South Philadelphia, and especially in the Washington Avenue area, I mean, those were all Italian merchants' businesses. Now they're all Mexican businesses or Asian businesses. It's the evolution of our society, where people come here, they struggle, they do well, and then they move on to the suburbs, I guess. I would like them to stay here, but the point is that that same Mexican merchant at 10th and Tasker was an Italian merchant 30 years ago. And the fact that people can't get into this country legally or in a dependable way, we need to make sure that we allow people to do their best. I mean, it's just, this is a messed up country these days.
Agree with that. So thanks for all those comments. One thing, we do want to follow up with you and have some further conversation later around some other ideas we have around potential sources to expand the trust fund, but we can do that offline. Sister Mary, welcome. Thanks for joining us. Obviously, you've been a founder and long-term leader of Project Home, and you all have built affordable housing in a number of neighborhoods around the city, but including some of the more expensive neighborhoods, such as Center City near Rittenhouse Square, and Chinatown, and Fairmount. And land in these neighborhoods these days is not cheap, and sometimes it's very scarce. So can you articulate a bit more about how the city can make sure that we can actually use housing development, affordable housing development, to sort of attack the economic segregation that exists in our neighborhoods and create opportunities for residents of all incomes to live in neighborhoods throughout the city?
I think the takeaway from that is that if you build housing for men and women that experienced homelessness, property values skyrocket. So there should be an affirmative plan to put more housing for the lowest, most vulnerable people in every neighborhood, and especially in the most economically vibrant neighborhoods, because the property values, again, just go right through the roof.
She's
I
absolutely.
couldn't resist. I just couldn't resist
I
that. I couldn't resist
Listen,
that. Okay?
I have learned over the years various things that I was wrong about, and it talked. I mean, the Sisters of Mercy taught me in grade school, and you taught me about all this, because I called you one day, if you remember. There were 4 or so townhouses right next to Project Home. I mean, attached to right next to the building. And the sign up was mid 400s. And I called her up and said, well, thank you for suppressing the housing values in Fairmount. So you are correct. You have shown many of us that being around poor people is not a bad thing. It's not a scary thing. It's something that we could all work together on. And I think that what's happening in Fairmount was positively affected by Project Home being there.
So, and that's true for all my colleagues here at CDC's, the APM, and seeing how the property values there and the investment in APM, even in very, very struggling neighborhoods, that affordable housing and development will leverage is an economic multiplier. But actually, my point, that was supposed to be like a little, not joke, but lighten the environment a little bit. To get us to think creatively, which you do so well. So we appreciate that. And we're really very grateful that you're here. This is a testament to your commitment to what we're all about. So having you here today is awesome. Awesome. But another important tool, because I think under the leadership of PACDC and all the people in this room, so many public housing policies have been advanced to really promote Philadelphia as an economically diverse and not an economically segregated community. And one of the most important tools that Rick and the leaders here have done is the land bank. Because in areas like Fairmount or even Center City, 810 Arch Street, where we're just going to be, which is right down the street, we're going to be opening up 94 units of affordable housing. A real strategic tool is the Philadelphia Land Bank, because it allows the city to acquire and dispose of properties that will keep, and even for Universal, and what you had talked about earlier, to keep affordable housing as new people come in, and it just mixes up the economic diversity, which is just so wonderful and would really be a very distinctive characteristic for Philadelphia. So we just want to hear a little bit more about your position on the Philadelphia Land Bank.
Well, I mean, as an at-large member for almost 24 years, I did not deal specifically with the district issues as a district council person does. And there is this desire, and understandably a desire, for district council people to have some, I guess, not control or involvement.
The word.
Control.
Control would be the word.
over development in their districts. However, you have to recognize, and John Street, love him or not like him, and I happen to love him more than I did years ago, because he gives me this great advice over text messages all the time. It's interesting. He always said to me, Jim, you need 9 votes. You need 9 votes for anything. Mayor needs 9 votes. Everybody else needs 12 to override a mayor. And if you're going to get a piece of legislation passed, you need 9 votes. So in order to get the 9 votes, there had to be specific changes to the legislation, which gave district council people the comfort to vote for something that actually was a good thing with restrictions. I think how you work with district council people on describing your plan of development, describing your ideas, interacting with them, interacting with the neighborhood groups, does make sense. However, it does slow down the process, and that's what's frustrating. So I think what the administration can do through its housing folks, its economic investment folks, its commerce director, can work closely with district council people to make the process faster. I wasn't happy with the outcome of the land bank legislation, but you weren't getting any legislation unless you had 9 votes. So it's, the most effective form of government is an enlightened monarch. But we live in a democracy, so you need 9 votes. I think the administration, with the right relationship with the council, and the right partnership with council, can move things faster than the relationship between this administration and council, which was not very good.
Well, we are excited to see that several city council members did introduce resolutions last week to begin transferring properties into the land bank, including the council president's office, and we presume those are going to get passed tomorrow. So that's an important step forward in getting the land bank actually up and running. And I guess the one key question I would follow up on Sister Mary's question is, public land is a key asset that the city controls. There's a lot of other cities where neighborhoods are strengthening, but there's not a significant ownership of public property. And so this is an opportunity to sort of use that ownership of that asset to advance key goals, policy goals. And one of them could be that if it's a strengthening neighborhood and there's public land owned there, how can we use that to foster mixed income development or affordable housing development in those communities to make sure that other residents that are low income that otherwise couldn't afford to move to that community can
I think it's a multifaceted discussion with all the stakeholders involved. But if you look at North Philadelphia around Temple, for example, there's a deep mistrust amongst the residents about Temple, and I think Temple is one of the best institutions we have going for us in the city. I think it's an opportunity for working class folks to get an education, to be a commuter student, to live on campus if you like. But if the history of that institution as it relates to the relationship with the neighborhood is good generally, but not always good. And a lot of the times, Temple winds up paying the price for private developers who develop in a haphazard fashion for student housing, for example, who disrespect the community, who drop cement on people's cars, who dump construction debris on vacant lots, who move in students without the fire alarms being certified. I mean, we've had legendary battles with some of these, a lot of out-of-town developers who want to stuff as many students into a building as possible to maximize their rents, while at the same time showing a level of disrespect for the community. Now, young people living in a neighborhood in college, when I lived at 20th and Ogonce and Olney at LaSalle, and we were not the best tenants in the building. I apologize. There were nice working people who didn't want to get up on a Thursday morning after we had a kegger on Wednesday night. But the point is that you have to control that too. But part of what Temple gets blamed for is the haphazard development of private sector developers who want to maximize profits by doing stuff half-assed. I mean, and for example, one of the things that drives me crazy about development, stuccoing the front of a building just makes me cringe when I see it, because I know 4 years from now, 5 years from now, there's going to be a moldy mess on the front of that building. So, I mean, those kinds of development activities really angers people. And that's why this debate over the stadium is very important, because it may be something that's really good for a Temple and the community, but you have to convince the community it's good for them, or it's going to be a problem. I mean, it's when they wanted to put the ballpark in Chinatown. Oy vey. It was like, I have never felt so beaten up on an issue in my entire life. John, I mean, to the credit to the Chinatown community, but I've never seen people lock arms and fight something. I mean, it was a daily struggle, and thankfully we shelved that idea and went to South Philly. But it's those kinds of issues that I think the administration, council members can work our way through when we're dealing with contentious issues in the neighborhood.
Yeah, being that we work on the other side of the tracks from Temple, we've experienced that. But one thing that's been really important is that through the NAC and through other programs that are supported by the city and the Housing Trust Fund, being able to acquire land and develop land, we've been able to broker a transition where Temple recognizes our constituents recognize that they have a valid voice and they have a format to speak in, and I think that's where keeping CDCs in that pivotal role of how do you manage that quality of life transition. I think for us, one of the things is that we don't want our longtime 20-year residents not to experience that wonderful parklet or garden that's going to pop up in the middle of Germantown Avenue, after they've struggled, not being listened to by 311 or whatever, and having those things. And part of that is really utilizing the land bank, but also once we've acquired land, how do we develop the land?
So Jim, it was a long election season. There was a number of candidate forums that I know you were at.
72.
I went to. My goodness.
72.
I certainly didn't go to that many of them.
And let me tell you, if they were an hour long, and they were moderated strongly, they were very beneficial. If they were 2 hours or more, and they weren't moderated, the two best moderators of forums was Sister Mary and Wilson Good, Mayor Wilson Good, Wilson's dad. We had the two best forums ever because it was moderated by people who put the hammer down after a minute answer and moved on to the next question. So yeah, it was a interesting process. It was.
So you followed those up with a few town halls this last week or so as well. And one of the things that I've heard you say at a number of those events was the importance of having a strong CDC in neighborhoods throughout the city. And so maybe to sort of close out this part of the session, you can just elaborate a little bit on your thinking around that, and what is the critical role that CDCs play in advancing housing and community development here in Philadelphia?
I think in order to make CDCs work well, you have to be open to their ideas. Again, top-down solutions, whether it's education, whether it's corrections, whether it's city services, whether it's housing development, top-down solutions coming from the all-knowing and all-wonderful government doesn't work. It has to come from the community up. And I think that having an open door on every level of service areas in commerce and in housing, in supportive housing, in behavioral health, in DHS, and all of those quality of life community things that we serve people with need to be driven by the people who actually deliver the services. And I think that's part of when government fails, it knows better than everybody else. We know better. We appreciate your ideas, but we're going to go this way anyway. And that's, I think, where the mistake happens. And I think it's very subjective, that this conversation, as far as I think it's attitudinal. I think it's attitudinal in that we don't know everything. You know, we have an opportunity to learn. We have an opportunity to collaborate, to innovate. And I think if we do that, we'll take the resources that we have and we'll stretch them to the best maximum possibility.
Sure, Elias. Yeah.
At the beginning of the panel discussion, I gave Mayor Kenny a sheet of paper that actually was a map. And I have about 10 of them here, so anyone later on want to take a look, you can. But I just wanted to point out the number of neighborhood advisory committees there are throughout the city. So right now we have about 19 neighborhood advisory committees that provide resources to community members as it relates to housing, education, employment, and a long list of other quality of life improvement things that they offer to community members. And at least for Universal Community Homes, NAC, we provide our services from Washington Avenue all the way down to Rittner, Broad Street to 34th Street, which is a large space. But if you were to look at the map, you would be able to see how much of Philadelphia neighborhood advisory committees assist. And so our neighborhood advisory committees throughout the city all doing a stellar job, whether it's South Philly, West Philly, anywhere in the city. And I just wanted to give everyone an opportunity to take a closer look at it when you have opportunity. I have flyers here, these maps here, so you can take a look at. But I definitely wanted to share it with him so that way he can actually have a greater understanding as to what we all cover as NACs. And we are available if anyone needs any assistance for any sort of.
But also, I think it's also worth remarking on that there are areas where there are none.
There are. So we definitely need to, and that could possibly be more funding for NACs so we can expand in NACs, have more NACs, and increase our NACs. All right. So like I said, right now we're performing with limited resources, and that's where funding needs to be had for our NACs.
And in some areas where there are none, it's some of the highest levels of poverty and lack of development. So
Yes.
So Jim, I want to thank you for taking the time to be with us this morning, be part of this conversation, and I think I can say this on behalf of the whole audience here, that we really look forward to working with you and your administration to move forward many of the issues that we talked about.
it's our
here today.
administration.
Our administration. Great to hear. So everyone, please join me in thanking Mayor-elect Jim Kenney and everyone on the panel for their participation this morning. Thank you. So I'd like now to invite Gina Snyder, Executive Director of the East Falls Development Corporation and Vice President of the PACDC Board, to come to the stage.
Good morning. Woo. Wilson Good Jr. is and has always been a champion of community economic development. A graduate of Philadelphia schools, including Central High School and that other university, the University of Pennsylvania, Wilson was elected in 1999 and sworn in January of 2000 as a Philadelphia City Councilman at Large, where he will serve until January. As chairman of City Council's Committee on Appropriations and the Committee on Economic Development, Wilson offered 160 bills with 147 adopted, which I think has to be some kind of record, changing the lives of Philadelphians for the better. To me, his work is all about follow the dollar. Wilson Good Jr. was watching who was getting the dollar and taking steps to get that dollar in the pocket of hard-working Philadelphians. His eye is sharp about how race and class bias can continue to benefit the few at the expense of Philadelphia's lower income and African American residents. Consider just a few of the brilliant ways he followed the green. Fair lending plans and community reinvestment goals from city depository banks is something he implemented. A living wage and benefit standards for city-supported employees, as we have heard earlier, diversity goals for government contracting, a revenue share increase for public education, and these are among many of the bills that he introduced. Another piece of legislation that was important to us is the city's CDC tax credit program, providing more than $50 million in flexible funding to support CDC neighborhood economic development since 2001. This program has helped to strengthen the industry, the CDC industry. In fact, CDCs have created an economic impact of $3.3 billion to the city and $5.1 billion to the state during the past 2 decades. Today, PACDC is pleased to present you with this recognition. Would you come up? Wilson Good Jr. for 16 years of leadership on community economic development in Philadelphia City Council, December 9th, 2015. Please join me in recognizing Councilman Good.
Good morning. It's my pleasure to be here. I will be very brief. I have some short prepared remarks, a one-pager. But as I sit here, as you can imagine this time, I'm very reflective over not just the last 16 years, but several years even before that. My relationship with CDCs has been extremely strong. I would almost call it a long-term marriage. Back when I started in government in 1992 with the Philadelphia Commercial Development Corporation, I was manager of commercial area services. And we found that commercial quarters were stronger where there were strong neighborhood business associations, but even stronger where there were community development corporations involved as well. And so that was sort of when we started dating. Then I moved to the Commerce Department, where I began to manage neighborhood economic development grant programs more directly and work more directly with CDCs. And I can say that's sort of when we became engaged. And then I moved on to City Council, wanting to affect policy directly related to economic development. And then that's when the marriage started. As we moved from engagement to marriage, at the end of my tenure at the Commerce Department, I convened revitalization roundtables with CDCs to find out what type of policy input you wanted. And then when I first came into City Council, I did the same thing. I convened revitalization roundtables with CDCs. But I could talk about that long-term marriage, which you've been involved in, so you know about it. One of the things you might not know in terms of what's at the heart of my work is simply that before I was even 3 years old, back in 1968, when Dr. King was assassinated, the day he was assassinated, my father was actually helping to found ACDC, the Advocate Community Development Corporation. So he was in North Philadelphia. He was not rioting. He was helping to found that CDC. And I actually grew up around the city at affordable housing projects, watching my father work with community groups, trying to better the communities. That was my favorite time, spending time with him and learning about that. And so those are some of my fondest memories. And so I didn't really understand how dynamic that work was at the time, but I began to learn its value to those neighborhoods and those residents, and learn the value of CDCs over time in terms of what government can't do alone, what businesses can't do alone, what banks can't do alone. CDCs sort of bridge that gap. And so I'm proud to be a part of this movement as both a administrator and as a policymaker, and glad that you've invited me to come here to honor me. But at this point in my career, after this long point in time, I really have to say thank you to you. As you choose to honor me, it's time for me to actually salute the work of CDCs, knowing the value of that investment, past, present, and future. So thank you very much.
Oh, hey everybody, how y'all doing? Oh, thank you, Councilman Good, for that wonderful, wonderful insight. It's a great story you told. And thank you, all of you, for joining us today for this great conversation, or set of conversations. And most particularly, a thank you to Dr. Teresa Singleton and her amazing team who have made today possible. They've been very strong partners of ours, and more importantly, strong partners for the CDC field, helping to uplift us, the field for the nation's admiration and respect, and we really are grateful for that. At the close of this portion of our program, we invite you to join us for the follow-up conversations on 4 key issues affecting our field. And all of those conversations will be taking place, except for one, upstairs in the 3rd floor. And we have staff and Federal Reserve personnel that will escort you and direct you to those locations. The one panel conversation that will be happening here in the auditorium will be around neighborhood identity, and that, again, will be happening here at the front of the auditorium. But before we embark on that conversation, we wanted to take a few moments to share with you an important learning from our friends and colleagues at PolicyLink. From their amazing national conference that they had, their Equity Summit, that attracted over 3,000 people from across the country and the world. We share this with you because while we know the arc of history bends towards justice, we know that it doesn't do so without a lot of tugging and a lot of pulling. And my colleagues and I really believe with our heart and soul that this industry, and the nation's industry of community developers, is the one industry that is strong enough morally and spiritually and professionally to do the tugging and the pulling. So with that, I'm going to ask my colleague, Garrett. Garrett, can you come up and turn on the wonderful video?
The protests are growing larger and spreading across the country.
The Occupy Wall Street protests in the financial district took a dramatic turn this weekend.
New York grand jury is about to investigate the shooting of another unarmed black man.
Their purpose was to peacefully disrupt what they see as the routine of injustice.
Step, move, walk. Witness moment, transformation to movement forward. An elder recently says to me, this is a protracted struggle. If we didn't believe we could make a change, we'd still be slaves. We have to continue the fight no matter what. A movement is not a flash of light. It is a flame, a torch passed from one generation to the next. And every so often, we're blessed with moments where the smolder transforms to blaze again, and we're forced to race down the path of progress. Step, move, walk, witness moment, transformation to movement forward.
It has spread steadily and far beyond Wall Street.
In 2011, a coalition of thousands shut down parks, city halls, banks, universities, the Brooklyn Bridge. The 99% occupied our TV screens and minds, a sizzling, static, electric spread. Step, move, walk, witness moment, transformation to movement forward. 2012, we saw a bag of Skittles become weapon, hoodie become funeral shroud. In 2014, a toy gun turned grenade, black bodies considered bomb threat, while silver badges shielded murder saw Ferguson burn and Baltimore rise. Now we watch as a new generation breathes and declares Black lives bulletproof, beautiful, radiant, priceless, necessary. Step, move, walk, witness moment, transformation to movement forward. 2014. In the Southwest, our own Iron Curtain, a fence all steel, a wall all concrete, barbed wire, knife edge, cut down by dreamers who dare to defy silence. Declare crossing a man-made border does not make a human illegal or alien. Who say to this government, this too is my America, I will not be rendered invisible. Step, move, walk, witness moment, transformation to movement forward. 2015. Across the country, love is finally constitutional, can no longer be legislated, mandated, or measured, and a commitment between two humans cannot be subject to religious interpretation in a nation built on religious freedom. Step, move, walk, witness moment, transformation to movement forward. In Seattle, Los Angeles, and New York, the people who keep our cities afloat, the working poor, working daybreak to dusk, grasping onto a disintegrating American daydream, demand their labor be compensated with a wage they can thrive, not just survive on, and minimum wage no longer equates to a marginal existence.
Vote to give millions of the hardest working people in America a raise.
Step, move, walk, witness moment, transformation to movement forward. 2015. In New York City nail salons, Asian women bend in manicure over prayerless hands, inhale unholy chemicals that cause cancer and miscarriages while their daily bread is stolen. Now they gather in numbers, a call for justice and safety that is finally being heard by lawmakers. Step, move, walk, witness moment, transformation to movement forward across the country. The decriminalization of marijuana means we don't lose brothers and sisters to a prison system intended to keep them there. In California, Proposition 47 reduced felonies, let loved ones come home to communities starved of their brilliance. In Dallas, a 14-year-old Muslim boy is accused and arrested for making a bomb. A simple hashtag becomes a call to action, and we stand with Ahmed, not ignorance. Step, move, walk, wake up. Our right to remain in slumber has been revoked. Silence and apathy are now the only crimes. Watch how every breath is a dance of dissent, every raised fist an act of resistance. Witness this moment in history turned blaze again. Every moment the flame is growing, but will you be the fire? This time, will you be ember? Will you be catalyst in combustion? Will you claim the torch?
Thank you, everyone. And again, we're going to break into our panel sessions. Panel C will be here in this auditorium, and the other panels will be upstairs on the third floor. Thank you again.